want to begin the panel. I have to begin today, unfortunately, with an apology from Ta-Nehisi Coates, who had a problem with his travel this morning and wasn't able to get on his plane to be here. He says he is very, very sorry, and I do think, that is sincere.
We all want our money back. That's right.
I am communicating his apology, and I'm also, apologizing on behalf of organizing the session, which still will be a great session. But we obviously we were here for a dialogue among different points of view. We still have different points of view here. It's just unfortunate. For all of you who picked up your packets on the way in, we have Ta-Nehisi's Atlantic article essay in there, and if you haven't read it, you certainly need to read it, because it is a very important document. It was in many ways the inspiration for putting together this panel. So my name is Leo Casey. I am the executive director of the Albert Schenker Institute, and I'm going to introduce my comrades here who are going to speak on the panel in a second. Let me say that what's obvious is that we are taping this panel so that we can put it up on the website and people who aren't here can see the dialogue afterwards. That creates a little bit of a logistic problem in terms of questions. So what we can do is we can do one of two things. We have index cards that you can write a question down on, and I can just read it out. Or if you prefer, you can stand up where you are and say your question, and then I will repeat it. So people who watch.
I have a microphone.
Oh, you have a microphone.
Great.
Okay, so Vicky has, in her usual very powerful organizing manner, made my complicated Rube Goldberg solution unnecessary, and she will just go around when the time comes for questions. So we are, I think, privileged today to have the people that we have on this panel to discuss this very important question. As you all know, during the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement, there was the development of, I think, two different approaches to the question of African American economic emancipation. After the first wave of the Civil Rights Movement had been successful in largely dismantling Jim Crow segregation, it was clear that unless the economic conditions and the economic legacy of slavery and of Jim Crow and of institutionalized racism in the North were addressed, that freedom would not be complete. And that was the inspiration for a Philip Randolph, Bayard Rustin, Martin Luther King, Michael Harrington, those folks who were the moving force behind the Freedom Budget. And it was also the inspiration later for James Forman when he put out the first call for reparations. And so today we have to discuss these two approaches. First, Paul LeBlanc, who is the author of a very important book on the Freedom Budget, A Freedom Budget for All Americans, and he has some copies, and he will gladly sell them to you if you'd like when we're done. If you haven't read it, you really need to take a look at it, because it really goes into the nuts and bolts of that whole movement, the historical rich detail. Paul is a professor of history at Pittsburgh and a long-time activist in the socialist and labor movements. We have Patrick Moran from University of, what's the university?
Florida State.
Florida State, okay. And Patrick has written, he's an economist, he has written many, many pieces on the economics of reparations and on the economics of racism and what is really essential to deal with that legacy that we're talking about. And then we have Jerry Watts from the City University of New York, who has written a number of books about different African American intellectuals. In particular, he's written about Amiri Baraka, he's written about Ralph Ellison, and he will fill out our panel here today. And Jerry is also, I think, a long-term scholar and activist on the left. And so without any further ado, let me begin with Paul LeBlanc.